Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Metzler here, one of the programmers with SF DocFest. Thanks again for joining us. We have a lot of great documentaries from around the world, and we're lucky enough you just saw the really wonderful film before us. And we have director Hedia Marin here. How are you doing?
Hi, Chris. Nice to see you. Hi, everybody watching
Nice
out
to see
there.
you. Well, this is kind of fun. This is like a kind of a preview Q&A because I know we're going to get a chance to screen your film in person, and I know this is your first Q&A with this film. So maybe a good place to start off is, you know, what was the kind of inspiration that you knew that you wanted to kind of turn a camera on yourself and your family?
Yeah, so I think, my oldest sister found my mom when she was 15 and I met her then. And, to kind of find out that was very shocking. Especially as a teenager, you never expect that your parents have had this whole other life before. And, I would tell people this story. My mom was living on a commune. She ran away from home and kind of give the whole background. And several people were like, "Oh, that sounds like a movie. That's crazy." And I was always like, yeah, sure. And I had always been videoing my family. So ever since I was 13, 14, I had a video camera, always recording them. So I had sort of compiled already a lot of footage of them. And then really the film idea came around when Carrie, my second sister, found my mom and found us. And at that point, I thought, this is too crazy of a story to pass up. And I just very maybe naively embarked on it, thought I would be shooting for a couple years and do a year of post and I'd be done. And that's really not what happened. It took a lot longer than that. And lots of things happened sort of outside of the film that aren't included in the film. And that sort of delayed things. And yeah, so it's I really went into it with this really kind of maybe slightly naive point of view. And I think that was helpful because I think if I had known how hard it would be to make this movie, I'm not sure I would have started it, to be perfectly honest.
Usually the best films, they kind of slowly suck you in that way.
Yes.
Yeah, it was great that you had this kind of wealth of kind of archival footage. I mean, when when you started kind of just filming your family, as a teenager, it was a much different time. I mean, we didn't all just have like kind of cameras in our pockets and things. Was that something that like your family was kind of like, did they tolerate it? Did they excite it? I just know this is like, it's hard enough to get my family to take photos sometimes. So like, what was it? Or did they just kind of chalk it up to you being you?
Yeah, they were always very supportive, both my parents. I think they really encouraged me to be creative and to really pursue anything I really loved. I didn't particularly love school. So I think having shown like a real interest in something was exciting for them as well. I think my mom was less tolerant, like some of it is in the film where she says, if anyone else sees this, I'm taking your camera and destroying it. So there was definitely moments where it would just be like too much for her. But I think for the most part, everyone was very tolerant. Also, like my sort of, my social kind of group at the time, lots of people were in bands. And so I ended up shooting lots of people's like shows and rehearsals and, had kind of started like a music doc on a friend's band in high school. So I really was that person that always had the camera. I really like showed up with the camera and it was just kind of a known thing. So not a ton of pushback, mostly pushback from my mom.
And as a filmmaker, I don't know if you've done other personal projects before, but like, how would you say, like, kind of telling a personal story kind of was different, documentary storytelling wise versus, films where you were maybe more the outsider?
I think it's a lot easier for me to be the outsider. I think, being able to zoom out and get a sort of bigger context of a subject or a character or whatever the theme is really useful. And I think that was one of the things that I struggled with most is actually being able to kind of frame things in a way and not get I was just kind of in the weeds a lot, like with this project, where I'd be like, is this interesting? Is this relevant to the story? Do people care about this? So there was a lot of like what to include and what not to include. and other films I've made, and specifically documentaries, I feel like I'm much more, it's much more clear to me. Like, you know, I see the footage and I'm like, there's the story, and I know how to make it, and I know what other footage I need to shoot, and it's all kind of comes together a lot easier. So my next project is definitely not going to be a personal film. And I really think having gone through this is just so amazing, because in comparison, really, I feel like everything else I've made is, you know, a walk in the park, literally. So
You know, there's this kind of discussion in the kind of larger documentary world about, like, you know, collaboration and, you know, how we bring, you know, subjects into films and things. So was your family, were they collaborators? Would you consider them collaborators at different points in time? And did you share them, you know, scenes or glimpses of the film while it was being made? And I mean, or even have they seen the final film? So what was that process of, like, making the film that you wanted to make, but also navigating those family things?
yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I think I was very conscious of trying to portray people in the light that I felt was maybe truest to them, you know, and not really manipulating things too much in the edit, in terms of, like, you know, there's lots of things you can do to create drama and create conflict that didn't really happen. So, you know, in terms of collaboration, everyone was really on board to be in the film. I chose very early on not to show anything to anyone, because I knew I would be shooting over a length of time, and I didn't want it to impact how them being self-conscious, because that was already something that I was sort of trying to work with people. You know, not everybody wants to be a camera. I don't particularly want to be in front of the camera. And you know, even including myself in the film was really like something some outside you know, consulting editor pushed me to do, and I think it's beneficial to the film. But you know, I completely sympathize with people not like wanting a camera in their face. So you know, I learned along the way. Like, I think at the beginning I really pushed probably people too much, especially Carrie and my mom meeting for the first time in New York. We shot nonstop for like 4 or 5 days, and I really didn't even give them a chance to, like, I mean, there was definitely cameras was turned off, but I didn't really, like, they didn't have a lot of time to bond before there was like cameras around. So yeah, no, I mean, it's a really, like, ethically, it's an important question to consider. And I think you know, when you bring family into it, it does add another layer of kind of complication, because you know, the cameras would turn off and then we would have dinner and they were staying with me. So there was no, like, I didn't have a lot of space either to, like, think through everything. Like, there was a lot of, like, you know, just kind of shooting. So yeah, I mean, I think, I'm not sure I would call them collaborators, but I would call them, like, obviously the most essential thing in the film. Like, you know, there's no film without my sisters and without my mom and my brothers. So and in terms of who've seen the film, my brother Mikkel is the only one who's seen the film so far.
Yeah.
So by the time this interview is out, maybe other people have seen it. I'm hoping to have both my sisters at the screening, and for them to be able to come up and do some of the Q&A as well. And my mom has said that she doesn't want to see the film. So that's kind of where that stands.
And why do you think she just doesn't want to see the film? Because, you know, she just isn't interested, do you think? Or it just, you know, she has her own story? Or
Her official line is that she lived it, and she doesn't need to see it for that reason.
okay.
I think, you know, I think it deals with a lot of it deals with a very difficult time in her life and very difficult situations. And I think it brings up a lot for her. So I think it's overwhelming emotionally. And, you know, I'm not sure that she necessarily wants to hear maybe what my sisters think. Like, I think she kind of does have her story, and she's sticking to it.
Right.
Is the feeling I get.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand. I mean, there's some folks that don't like to look at photo albums, you know, because just like, you know, why go back and, you know, the past. Was there kind of an aesthetic that you chose in the way that you know, kind of shot and edited the film that you wanted to kind of bring?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's sort of, the character, California is a character in the film. I always had a theme in mind of like the ocean and was very obsessed with shooting. I ended up doing a lot of shooting of the ocean. This is a very pared down amount that's in the film. So aesthetically, I really felt like poetic imagery would serve it well. I knew that I did have some help with some of the New York shoot, and some of the other shoots I had a little bit of help with, but I also knew that I wanted to shoot it myself for the most part. And I really, yeah, I wanted to sort of capture the essence of California too, what it feels like to live here, why, what's the pull? Because to me, part of the interest of the story also is that, my mom ran away from home from her Boston roots, ended up, in Northern California, had these 2 pregnancies, placed these children for adoption. It was very traumatic. And then less than 10 years later, she moves back, or maybe a little more than 10 years, but we ended up moving back to Santa Cruz. So we moved back to the place where this had happened. She moved there with my brothers and I. And this is, of course, my brothers and I not knowing about our sisters, and my mom taking us up to, Brookdale and to the commune. And so there was a lot of, to me, California was always a subject, because it was always like, what is it about this place that brought her back here after that happened? Because you would imagine that maybe that would be a place you would avoid and not want to go. But I think the beauty of California and the appeal of it just went out over the past.
Well, very cool. Well, thank you for taking the time to kind of like, make this film and, kind of persevere. It just wound up being really beautiful, and appreciate you sharing it here with us at SF Doc Fest.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And yes, can't wait to hear from people. I love feedback, and
Yeah, what's a good way to kind of follow the film on social media and reach out to you?
That's a great question. I'm working on my website, so I will be sure to include those details in the listing. But yeah, there is a Twitter and an email, and I'll just put my personal email in there as well, so people can just reach out if there's any questions.
Very cool. And is it beforeus.com?
Yeah, beforeusfilm.com, and the email is beforeusfilm@gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, very cool. Have a great week.
Thanks so much, Chris. Look forward to seeing you in person.
Yeah, most definitely.